Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we are looking at the readings for Good Friday, specifically the gospel reading for Good Friday. We get the Gospel of John, and it starts with right where we left off yesterday. As Chelsea and I were talking about Holy Thursday and the Last Supper and Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And Jesus decides not to flee in the same way that we kind of see in the Old Testament that God tells people to be prepared to do after the Passover meal. To be ready to flee as soon as possible. Instead, Jesus takes the time to take off his outer garments, wash the disciples' feet, and then he takes Peter, James, and John with him to the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's where we pick up today, and I've got Andrew here with me. So it says in the readings that Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley. There was a garden which the disciples entered, and Judas the betrayer knew of this garden. And so we have this scene where we enter in, and Jesus begins to pray. We call this the agony in the garden. We know that from some artifacts like the Shroud of Turin, from different accounts and things like that, that Jesus was praying so intensely that he begins to sweat blood. We talked about this as a medical phenomenon called hematohydrosis, where the whole body becomes like one giant bruise. And so Judas goes to the high priest. They get the soldiers and the servants that are with them, and they go to the garden. They find Jesus. Judas kisses him on the cheek, and I love this, and I want to look directly at it. It says Jesus sees them and he says, "Whom are you looking for?" And they say, "Jesus the Nazarene." And he says to them, "I am." But the "I am" that he says is the same "I am" as the name that God uses for himself when he passes over Abraham, or Moses, passes over Moses. He says, "I am." And the response is that they turn away from him and they are knocked to the ground, which is like so cool. I read that and I don't know why I hadn't really caught on to it before, but I really reflected on it lately, that I'm just like, we know that in the readings that we've had recently that like his name above all names will be exalted because of his obedience and all of that. But like the proclamation of "I am Jesus the Nazarene," and they're knocked to the ground. It's just really cool.
Yeah, imagine like at that point, like I'm just going home. Like
what
how do you go on for the rest of this? Like,
yeah, you're right. What do you do now?
Right.
Yeah,
but they do continue and.
Yeah, so he's arrested. He's taken to Ananias' house, and then he's kind of put on trial. He doesn't really say anything. His response is, "I was with all of you in the temple. You know exactly what I said. So if you want an account of what happened, ask them." Right? Kind of like very sternly, like, you know exactly who I am and what I'm about. If you have a problem with it, you do something about it. And so they take him to Caiaphas, who was the high priest of the time, and do the same thing. They put him on trial. They hit him. They pluck his beard. We had that reading from Isaiah recently about the servant. And so we see all these things that are unfolding. Then he's taken to Pilate. Pilate can't find anything wrong. In fact, Pilate says, "Are you a king?" And he's like, "You don't understand the kingdom which I come from." And then Pilate doesn't want to have anything to do with it and turns it back over to the Jews. The Jews are like, no. We only have one king, and that's Caesar. Which is interesting,
right.
I think, in a lot of ways. Because clearly they've been waiting for this Messiah figure. But they so badly don't want it to be Jesus that they'd rather claim Caesar as their king.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many other kind of false messiahs or other revolutionaries,
right.
Even probably including Barabbas, who we'll come to, that were trying to overthrow the Romans because they despised that their oversight so much, and yet when it was convenient for them, they said, "Oh yeah, Caesar is we're all. I love Caesar. Go Caesar."
Yeah,
and it's easy to say, they shouldn't have done that, but we all do the same thing.
Right.
When it's convenient for us, we are happy to say that Christ is the King of our lives, but
when it's not,
we don't.
We're always really good at blaming Jesus or God when something goes wrong, but never giving him credit for the things that go right in our life. Yeah, absolutely. And this does happen here in this reading as well, that Pilate, I think, is so kind of I don't know, dumbfounded by all of this, that he's like, what? Like, okay, it's your custom. It's not my idea, but it's yours that I release one of the prisoners at the Passover feast. And they say, give us Barabbas, who was a revolutionary. And we've talked before, Barabbas, if you break down the etymology of his name, means son of the father, Abba, the father. And so we've talked about, like, maybe there was an understanding that this was the Messiah they were actually looking for, because he was a revolutionary, he was standing up to the Romans. And I'm sure that seemed very odd too, that it's like, we want the guy who's fighting the Romans, Caesar's our king. Like, wait, those two things don't make sense.
Right.
So Pilate sends Jesus to be scourged. So we have the scourging at the pillar, where to Roman law is you would receive 40 lashes, but Jesus was not Roman. And so we have theologians and doctors who have talked about anything between 40 and like 150 lashings. And then we have the crowning of the thorns. He's given the purple cloak. He's mocked. And the inscription that's over the cross, INRI, we see that a lot of times. We don't know what that means sometimes, and that's okay. It means that each person who was crucified would actually have the thing that they were guilty of on their cross. And so his is Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. And the high priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Jews, they see this and they say, no. He claims to be the King of the Jews. And Pilate says, I've written what I've written. That's it. Like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm done. And, we know that he washes his hands of it and everything. And Jesus even says it's the greater sin for the people who turn to me over to you. And we have the story of the two thieves. We know that because it's the feast of the Passover, that they wanted those men to die before the feast would actually take place. So he says to break the legs of the two thieves. So they break the legs, because what would happen on the cross is you would choke to death. You would die from what's called asphyxiation. And so they break the bones of the two thieves, and when they get to Jesus, he's already dead. Soldier pierces his side, blood and water flow forth. Even Pilate is shocked to know that Jesus has died. And we hear about the centurion who realizes that truly this man is who he claimed to be. He's truly the Messiah. But why do we call it Good Friday?
Why do we call it? That's a great question. I mean, it seems like the worst possible Friday, or any day. And so, why do we call it Good Friday? It really comes down to, what was all of this about? Like, obviously, this was, the greatest act of evil that mankind could have committed. We killed God.
Yeah.
And yet, the way that Jesus goes about it and the way that he took it on as an act of love, it's the greatest act of love that could also possibly be imagined. And I saw a cartoon once that explained it this way. It's like, if somebody pushed you out of the way of a bus, like, you'd say that was a good thing, right? Like, that's a pretty good thing. Mm-hmm. And like, this is so much better than that. Plus, we also know that that he's going to rise.
Yeah.
So so it's not only that he has conquered death for us, but that we know he's going to conquer death as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's as much. It's the way that Catholic theology and spirituality approaches suffering in general. Like, yes, this is awful, but there is a deeper level that we can make this a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes I think when people hear the words Good Friday, they think everybody who was there to witness all of this must have not thought it was a Good Friday. Well, no, they didn't, because they didn't have the understanding of the resurrection, right? Like, we even know from the readings that we get on Easter Sunday that Peter and John, who were the first ones to the empty tomb, still don't understand what was being fulfilled in the scriptures. Right. So Good Friday is very much a term that we get after Easter. Because while the greatest evil that could possibly happen did happen that day, the greatest act of love trumps that evil. Right. And that's why we call it Good Friday. That's why we take the time to celebrate this day. And we look forward to the resurrection coming on Sunday. And tomorrow we have the Easter Vigil, which is like the highest form of the Mass that we have. We have, it's like 18 readings with the Psalms and different things like that. So tomorrow's reflection video is going to be like 4 hours long. No, I'm just kidding. But we'll go through some of those readings and talk about things, and I think I'll have Andrew and Erica join me for that one as we go through that. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, Andrew, for being here and for taking the time. If you could like and subscribe and share these videos, we would appreciate that very much. We appreciate your support of our ministry. Please know that we are praying for all of you here at All Saints, and we ask that you pray for us as well. God bless.